Hello and good evening to all of you joining us today. I am Joella from the Singapore Art Museum and welcome to another episode of Skill Futures. Tonight, we'll be tuning into a film screening by Khairullah Rahim titled Terang Benderang. This session is the 8th episode in the Skill Futures series. If you've been tuning into the series, thank you so much for staying the course with us as we come into yet another phase of this visual experiment. And for those who may be new to this series, welcome. If this episode has intrigued you, please check out Singapore Art Museum's YouTube channel, which has a dedicated playlist for this series. Moving on, I'd like to quickly introduce our host for this evening. Tonight, we are joined by artist Khairullah Rahim, who is an artist working across mixed media installation, object making, painting, photography, and moving image. His explorations delve into complex strategies of resourcefulness for everyday survival in environments under constant surveillance. Through various means of collaboration and critical thinking, his practice considers mindful ways of shedding light onto the veiled narratives of his community while factoring in the necessity for opacity. Recurring points of departure in his work premise around themes of queerness, desire, resistance, aspiration, labor, and ethics of disclosure. Khai is a graduate of Rutgers University with an MFA in Visual Arts from Mason Gross School of the Arts in 2023. He received a BA in Fine Arts from LaSalle College of the Arts in 2013, where he also currently teaches as an adjunct lecturer. My recent conversations with Khai were centered around exotic fruit and his use of fruit time as a metaphor for acceleration in his other video works, such as Buah Dahsyat. But instead of fruit, we'll be thinking about something much more diffuse and elemental today. We'll be thinking about light. I won't spend too much time talking about the film itself because I'm sure you'd all like to hear it from Khai himself, but I'll just share some quick thoughts here too as they came to me when preparing for this program. Khai's work is often grounded in his immediate neighbourhood, Boon Lay, and this film is no different. I've always been struck by his way of balancing techniques such as pacing and image cropping with critical commentary. Somehow he also manages to infuse humour in just the right places and in just the right amount. When we were talking about his distinct approach towards making moving image works over WhatsApp, Khai said, and I quote, "In my mind, I'm making a sculpture, but in my hands, I'm using a phone," end quote. Thinking about the screen as something sensuous and tactile is probably why the resulting works are as compelling and captivating as they are. And now, just for a few housekeeping notes, as this is a film screening and each of our own devices have been tuned differently, I would like to advise you that there may be loud sounds, so feel free to adjust your volumes accordingly. There may also be unintended glitches that may arise from technical issues, so please do be patient with us if those happen. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over the screen to Khai, who will say a few words about the film and how it all came to be. Thank you, and over to you, Khai.
Thank you, Joella, for the introduction. I think Joella has mentioned quite a fair bit of the research that I do, but maybe for the benefit of those who are not so familiar with my practice, I'll just add on a bit more. Thank you for coming for this screening. So I think the film, or rather the documentary that you're gonna watch, right, is very much just like any of the other films that I've made since I think about 3 years ago, where I sort of like stumbled into this medium. I was very interested to kind of like focus on light and also thinking about visibility, social class, and power structures, and how all those different, seemingly very separate things, how they overlap with each other. The film that you're gonna watch, titled Terang Benderang, consists of 3 parts. Okay, so I don't know, like I think when I was making this film, I was also thinking of it as a kind of like a musical movement. So the first one being kind of like me thinking around desire. The second one, I was really thinking about secret life, and the last one, I sort of like collaborated with a brilliant artist, Noor, on their work, and it's centered around the mirror. So without giving away too much, I think we can proceed with the sharing. Yeah.
aku cakap dengan kau jangan bilang siapa Serius. Okay, so 2 hari lepas aku dapat message I love you, I miss you. Random gila. Kau tahu lah macam mana dorang message kan dekat app. So aku tak layan. Tapi bila aku dapat satu part ni, aku macam pelik tau. Dia kata are you okay? Why didn't I see you today? Tu aku macam, dia ni siapa sah? So aku try to macam, okay, to be honest, aku ada suspect Aku tahu ni siapa, tapi aku tak, macam not so sure. So bila aku try to find out more, betul lah, it's him. Betul, ya. Kita jumpa lah. Gila Aku macam, berani pula aku nak jumpa dia. So aku jumpa dia. Dia bilang semua. Dia ada bini. Tempat yang dia kerja tu bukan tempat dia tau. Dia bukan orang sini. Bini dia tak tahu. Entahlah macam mana siap rabak sah. Tak adalah. Tak ada. Kita jumpa minum kopi, berbual gitu je. Macam berbual awkward lah. Entah. Kesian pun ada. Aku tak ada nombor dia. Dia ada nombor aku. Dia kata nanti papa dia call aku.
Pathways to heaven. But what's heaven to a man? Afraid of his own darkness? He will set the world on fire, convinced he is sharing his own light. God made us in his likeness. We curse ourselves with disease, seeking perfection in likeness, perpetually seeking reflection in the presence of light. The first humans out of Eden spent their night time in a cave, hiding from beasts they thought might tear them apart. When daylight came, the puddling of dew in the caves became water for drinking, satiating the thirst of exile. They caught glimpses of their reflection, and they held this encounter with adoration, but also asked who they were for the very first time. Reflection aside, they realized that with light there was heat, that with heat there was comfort. It wasn't much later that they discovered hunger, and it wasn't too much later they discovered fire. Said to be bowls of water, then polished shards of volcano glass, The mirror that we have now is said to only be 150 years old. At one point, only the wealthy could have an inkling of their own image. Sand and limestone from the earth, melted in a third of the heat of the sun, fed onto a bath of molten tin. Glass flows across tin and floats until it cools, then cooled further to prevent any internal breaking before getting cut into sheets. Glass sheets must be pure and free from residue before a thin layer of silver is coated onto the back surface of the glass. But silver alone is not enough. For a shiny image of the self, another coat of protection must be applied, so your mirror can remain reflective over time. They say it takes one to know the other, and that beauty, no worth, no value, is the eye of the beholder. So will you be my mirror? Will you tell me who I am when my sight eventually turns to grey? Will you still keep me warm and make heat with your touch? Will you stave off my hunger with the sound of your voice in the absence of light? Can I trust you to not deny me of my lightness?
Thank you so much for watching the film with us and for spending time with us. And thank you, Kai, for making the film and making yourself available also. We'll move into a bit of a Q&A right now. But I do apologize if you hear any crackling sounds in the background. We are testing out our PA system here at the museum. So hopefully that can also be embraced as part of the program and its essence and spirit. So please feel free to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, to ask Kai any questions about his practice, about the film. But whilst we give everyone time to marinate and sit with the film that we've just watched, maybe I can kick things off with a question to Kai. And it's more of a broad question around perhaps how your practice has developed over the years. So you've moved from painting to installation and now, of course, to moving image as well. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit with us as to what prompted or also motivated you to make these shifts within your practice.
I don't know, like to be frank with you, I don't think it was ever a kind of like motivation to like develop things. It's just I think it was a very natural thing for me that I think even when I started with painting, I've never felt like I just want to stick with painting. or I want to hone a certain kind of like finesse towards like the craft. I think for me, it has been very much about developing a language and storytelling. Um, so, because painting came first, I'm not saying painting is not important. Painting is very important for me because painting provided the basis of my sensibility. But I think it was a very natural progression that the painting became objects, and then they became sculptures, they became assemblages, then they become installation, and now moving image. But I think like what you mentioned even before the screening, right? Like you were saying something about. Um, I think you quoted me saying about I am thinking of painting, but I'm making a sculpture. I think when I say I'm thinking of painting, I don't. Maybe it's not about the act of painting, but painting as a kind of like my foundation in terms of visual aesthetics. You know, but right now also like I'm very much interested in developing the language of storytelling, and this is also a bit it's quite unsettling because sometimes I don't even know what I want, right? But what I kind of like figured out is that it's not just visual language; it's also objects. I'm talking about like tangible things, you know, or how can intangible forms be presented in a format that is tactile, that is intimate, you know. It's also a bit like I'm always finding an issue, right, with all the work that I'm making because I'm very rarely content with the work that I make, you know. But that's the fun part about this journey that I'm in right now is because I realize I'm no longer held back by this burden of like perfecting something, you know. I'm just doing things because I know like whatever I'm making it's not about finding that resolved, very fine-tuned um, end product. You know, for me, it's really about the act of going out, like making this film. This film is not the work is not the film, right? The work is actually me thinking, me observing, me speculating, and making these narratives, combining real lived experiences, but also injecting some kind of like humor, you know, into the work that is not necessarily or entirely real, right? Because a lot of these things are also speculated, you know, like the story of the man that I met, who actually has a wife, you know. But if you notice, there's also a lot of gaps in that story. You know, I did not mention what app, I did not mention what is his workplace, I did not mention like how do I know him prior to this. So it gives a lot of kind of like room for the viewers to also participate and make their own speculations. Like, oh, maybe this is this, maybe that is that. You know, so I try to like inject those things um, in what I make. Yeah. I still make sculptures. I still make
Yeah,
paintings.
of course.
Just that, I don't think of them as like, oh, I'm a painter. I'm making a
Mm.
painting. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think also, since you're also touching on the story in the second movement, we also have a question from one of the attendees on the narration, the use of narration or text throughout the film in general. And I think you spoke a bit about the second movement, but that's also quite prominent in the third movement as well, since it also features a poem by 𝘍𝘶. So I think it'd be helpful to also hear from you how you were approaching the use of text and the poem that was accompanying the video. And yeah, whether you could also take us through a little bit of your headspace when you were putting that together.
It was actually a very practical move, actually, you know, because while I was making this film, I think you know, right? Like midway of like making this work, I was starting to feel unwell. I was really feeling ill. So I was like, okay, like maybe also, but also a refreshing way to like problem solve this is to bring in a different voice, but a different voice, not in the sense of like a voice. Though I also can talk about a voice later on. meaning like the writing of Noor. So I spoke to Noor and I asked them if they have any um, writing in mind, like this is what I'm doing, this is about life, but this is also really experimental. It doesn't have to be anything too polished. They told me that they would get back to me in a few days. And when they got back to me, like, nah, this is the writing. And I read it. I'm like, oh my god, like this fits really well because the piece is centered around the history of mirror, and also thinking about how mirror is an element that I kind of like played around, especially when I was making the mask. I'm talking about how mirror reflect and deflect light as a kind of like defense strategy, but it's also talking about like the labor of making this object, that sort of like incited some kind of like awareness and obsession of the self, because that's when humans get to see their own image for the very first time. But also wrote in a very romantic, I don't know if it's romantic, but I felt it was quite romantic and quite poetic. Again, right, there's this whole, is this like a writing in the view of the mirror as protagonist or antagonist? So it's very blur, and I like that, because the funny thing is when you use the word experimental, I feel like that gave me a lot of liberty to like explore and play around, right? I from the beginning I know that okay, there will not be any protagonist or antagonist. There's no main character. Even the three movements, they are not like in terms of like timeline wise, they're not equal. So I was kind of like playing around with that. So that was the first part in thinking about working with Noor. But then we also discussed at length about the voice. So there were many ideas that were brought up. But of course, like I think because of that, because of timeline, because of like I was feeling ill. So you see, like I'm not really like it was a very flexible and very organic process. So I was like, okay, you know what? I think it would be also interesting to kind of like, instead of getting someone with a powerful stance, right, to talk about the history of mirror, but we get someone who is usually not taken seriously. Like, what if you get like a child to speak, And obviously, like I brought in my niece to do this. She has no basically she doesn't know art, like for her art is mixing colors, which is also art actually. But like that kind, like this language is very foreign for her. But I thought it was quite interesting to kind of like, because I did not give her directions in sense of like I want you to speak like this or I want you to speak like that, So it the whole recording was taken within like 2 takes. It was very like on the go. Obviously there were many cuts because obviously there were also a lot of words which is like a lot of 7-year-olds would not be able to pronounce that. Yeah, so I think that was a kind of like, I mean, if you notice that if I were to talk about all the 3 movements, there's a lot of like shuffling back and forth, So I think that's why I think this kind of process is very refreshing for me, because the work can change at any point of time depending on circumstances, right? What if I fall even more sick earlier? Maybe I would just make like a 5-minute film or something. I don't know. But that was nice. But also, like, I think in the future, or if another opportunity comes, I would love to also like work with non-artists, and that has been a bit difficult for me, because I think all artists, all makers, they go back to a kind of like some kind of like a comfort zone where you cannot be just all out and and whack, and at some point you need to feel safe and comfortable, and that's when I always come back to my peers. I always go back to my circle of like confidants that sometimes I speak them with the work. But I also always wonder, what if I work with like completely non-artists? You know, I think that would be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on quite a few things in your response that I kind of wanted to also like, I guess, get more of your thoughts on. But I wonder whether one way to enter into that would be to think about, I guess, the visual language within the film itself. And the film is, just full of hints and gestures and subtleties. And you use masks, for example, you're cropping things really extremely. And the texture also is a huge element in the film. And I know you're not interested in resolving, so to speak, some of these questions, but where are you at in terms of balancing, really opaque references for reasons such as safety, alongside, communicating something really plainly? Because I think this duality is something that you touched on in your earlier response, but it also plays into the film's interest in light, kind of as a double-edged sword, right? Like too much light is not a good thing, but too little is also not, ideal. And so I wonder whether this use of the metaphor also extends from your own methodology. Yeah, what might your thoughts be?
Yeah, I think so maybe it's about, okay, the I think metaphors will always be metaphors, right? And like what, like I think if you talk about masking or like imbue them with like different symbolism, different meanings. You know what I like about that, or I don't know, not say what I like. What I feel is very powerful about that is because it creates new narratives. So I feel like even when you watch the same scene, maybe different people can have very different readings of the work. And I think that act of like complicating, I'm not looking to because the kind of book that I'm thinking about when I make the work is very complex. You know, when we talk about like um, poor people, this is something that it's very difficult to talk about poor people. Like how many poor artists are there, or how many artists are there from working class communities? Why are a lot of these things being there's a lot of gatekeeping, right? You need to go swimming classes to be an Olympian, like a swimmer. You need to go to piano classes to be a musician. Why? Or you need to go to film school. You need like equipment to be a filmmaker. But I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I mean, yes, that would help, but there are also alternative ways. Is it difficult? Of course it's difficult, but it's very possible. So that's why I think like sometimes when we look at the pairing, they're not just there. I mean, obviously it's loaded with all these metaphors, right? There's already a lot of like confusion and complication happening. But I also sometimes I'm very interested to hear like what do people receive from watching the film. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with what I'm thinking, but I thought that's also quite precious and quite valuable as artists, because like the relationship is a two-way street. Like in that sense, I'm interested with what the viewer is thinking. Or that's also how I'm thinking a kind of like access for the audience to interact with the work. I think sometimes when we think about access, like artworks need to be more accessible, there are also many ways of like reading that, right? Because I think it's problematic when we think about that in just a manner of like, how can we make art more accessible? Oh, the solution is by giving answers. Maybe it's not about giving answers or like force feeding answers, right? I think maybe it's about also facilitating a kind of like dialogue. And what is that dialogue? And there can be many different kinds of dialogue for people to interact with the work. Yeah. So I think it is that kind of thinking when I'm like pairing things, because a lot of the pairings don't make sense. A lot of the pairings, like I deliberately make them. There's a kind of like friction between those things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in a way to hear how you've been thinking about, I guess, also the frictions that you come up against in trying to visualize something that resists visualization in a way. And we do have a question in the chat that I think would maybe also open up a new topic. And I know this is something that's close to your heart as well. But the question reads, "Hi, thanks for this sharing. Do you experience any censorship in the making of your work?" And yeah, like how would you like to respond to that also as well?
Of course, a big yes, big bold highlight italic yes. Yeah. There's So are we talking about censorship now? I think this is the thing, right? Like, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. I wanted to say something that I've been thinking about, like, with regards to censorship. Oh my God, I completely lost it. I was so hyped and because
It will come back to
yeah,
you. It will come back to
I
you.
was thinking about this, like how censorship is there, you know, like there's no question about it. Oh yeah, um, I think my way of like tackling this is to really kind of like move away from the whole making a work that is subtle, you know. Yes, my work is not um, very explicit in pointing this means this, that means that, this is queerness, this is resistance, this is policing, right? It's not, I'm also using a kind of like hinting when I talk about that. But the kind of like visual language that I'm using is also very maximalistic. I don't know, I think there's a kind of like, I do not want to use subtlety as a strategy because a lot of people are doing it, a lot of people have done it. And I think maybe artists can also think of like other ways to kind of like work around censorship. Censorship is there, like here in Singapore, whether you like it or not. I don't like it, you know, but I also need to put the work out there, you know. That's why when I have opportunities like this to make experimental work, I get really excited, right? Because in some ways, I'm also being given permission by the institution to kind of like play around with this. Yeah, but censorship is there, and I a lot of like we need to talk about it. You know? I don't think people are talking enough about censorship. I mean, like people are talking about what censorship is and why it's good or why it's bad, but also we need to talk about how we can, until we can fix this problem, like how do we continue to put out our works without, you know, losing the integrity of like, the vision of the artist.
Yeah, I think maybe in that thread, then I wonder whether it will also be you will also be open to sharing with us how you collect and combine footage together whilst you're making films as well. Because there's something that you said in your response, like there's no point kind of like skirting around and trying to be quiet, and also like trying to kind of like be subtle, quote unquote, about references. And I think it's funny because I use the word subtleties to also describe your film, but I guess maybe we're thinking about it in very different ways. I would really like to hear about how you approach collecting footage, because I know you hoard images also and footage, and then how you then work through in your mind combining it in the context of a film.
I think obviously, I mean, we all have access to our phones now, right? So I think that's obviously like the first thing I think about. But also it's not just also about going out and recording things, right? It's also about like how do you catch. I mean, I'm trying to see if there's a better word, like catch or capture, because these are also quite violent gestures, you know. But photography is actually quite an aggressive medium. Have you gone out, you know, like you want to take a footage of people playing soccer, right? People playing soccer, you take out your phone, everyone will freeze, you know. There's something about like the power of the camera there. But I don't know, like I think I really don't know. It's funny. This is something that I'm still in the middle of all this. I don't really decode like how I do this. But it's funny because when I get like responses like from other people, right? Like sometimes to the point like I have a very close relationship with my nephews and my nieces. So we would go out together a lot, and sometimes they would also pick up like before I see those things, they'll be like, "Oh, Ayul, look at that," or "Look at that bicycle. It's in a strange position," kind of like gesturing me to take out my phone and like go and capture that moment. So I thought, oh, like even this has been picked up by people around me. Whereas for me, right, um, I don't know, you know. If you listen to the second movement of the piece, I realize when I'm like ruminating and speaking, right, I use a lot of I don't know also, because I think a lot of times I'm like how I move about is really also like how I get footages. It's a very organic thing. Most of these films, like when I make them, even from the beginning, since my first film, they were never like written and then scripted. It was always like, let me look into my archives, like what do I have and how can I bring them together, you know, different combinations, different ways of like patching them up, you know, and then see what it creates, and how layers change narrative. um, I think that is how I work around like footage, you know, um, because I think I I don't know, like it's very funny, right? Because like I've never really spoke about this. I spoke about this briefly with you, like in object lesson space. But I think I'm also thinking a lot in terms of like visually, right? Because that's where my foundation is. Like Bollywood is a big deal in my life. So when I listen to like Bollywood music, which is like almost every day, you know, it's not just about hearing. It's also about what I create in my mind, right? So I think that's. But sometimes I don't know what I'm creating. You see, maybe you can come to me in like 20 years time, and then maybe I can like understand better, because I feel I'm in the gist of the moment right now. I'm really just in the momentum. Yeah.
Yeah, there are like two questions that have come in from the audience, and I think maybe one that's a natural lead up from what you've been talking about. Maybe instead of speaking a bit about, I guess also a lot of this comes from a lot of intuition in a sense also. But one of the perhaps more practical elements that the audiences are also interested in are what are some of the places that are featured in the film? And did you take all of this footage recently as well for the film?
Again, what's the first question? What, like, where is
What
it?
are yeah, like what are some of the places? So not all of them were taken in Boon Lay, for example. So just wanting to hear from you where some of these things were recorded.
Primarily, they were recorded in Boon Lay. Only the first one. It was recorded like I think in a few places in New York, in New Jersey, in Jeddah, in Hong Kong. It's funny because when I make this thing, I was talking about, you know, like this whole idea of aspiration and desire, but also different people get to travel. I mean, like travel is a luxury, right? But when is it luxury? Like, do you travel for leisure, or do you travel for work? You know, um, I my first the first time I took a plane ever was when I was, I think, 25 or 26, and that was because I got into a residency program in Tokyo. So if not, traveling would never be in my mind, just because I come from that kind of background where travel is truly um, a luxury, you know. So maybe it's a blessing. The opportunities that I've gotten, um, especially recently. So I mean, that's how I sort of like go out and get all these footages. Especially for the first movement, I really wanted to talk about different lights, right? And you get to experience different light. One primarily, yes, through traveling, because you know when you go to like a different space geographically, you experience different kind of like light. So I think that's how I get access to all those footages. Yeah. What was the second question about the?
Was it all taken recently also?
Maybe 2 years, 1 year, 2 year. Yeah, this was the period when I was doing my MFA. So there were a lot of ideas. In fact, now I think like when I go through, this is a fun thing, right? Because I do not have like a proper desktop to make a film, and I keep on using my phone. You know, like once I'm done with the film, I'm like, okay, I can erase all this like memory space, so I can use it to get more footages. Yeah, but a lot of these are maybe like 2 years max. They've been around, and there are also so many more footages that I still do not have excuses to use yet. But maybe they don't have to be films. Maybe they can just be there for me to look at.
Yeah, they can just be for a while until maybe another use reveals itself to you. And I think also like it's another question that came through has to also do with the use of pixelation in the film as well. And the question reads, thank you for this. I'm watching this from the comforts of my home and was actually more intrigued by the layers of pixelation in the film. Was this intended as a watching experience or aesthetics, or is it a strategy of sorts? Yeah, what are some of your thoughts?
I think first and foremost, it's just me being resourceful, me using what I have. That's the first thing, right? But of course, when you get the footages, you look at them, you sort of like there's a lot of things that you realize, oh, this could actually really work. Number one, if you talk about like poor resolution, right? Like poor itself is like, oh, like this makes a lot of sense, like in a very literal sense, but also like I appreciate that, you know, because like when was the last time how often do we get to see poor resolution images? It's not common these days. You know, when was the last time you see an image that is out of focus? Not because it's intentional, you know, but also I think when I was like dealing with like pixels, it's so interesting because pixels also kind of like mask the image, so you can see but you cannot see. But you know, those are the things that maybe I kind of like use those rationale to kind of like comfort myself or like give myself an excuse for not buying a video camera, because I've been doing this for like 3 years. Maybe I should just get one. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe let me just stay in this. I don't know, like it will be sad, right? Because like, what if the next film I make and they're all like super slick? I'm like, this is not my work, you know. Yeah. Look, I wanted to say something again. Oh my god, I keep forgetting things. I wanted to say something about taking poor pixels. I don't know. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, if I recall it, I will say it.
Later, when it comes back to you, you can expand. But yeah, I think we have about 10 minutes left in our time together today. I'll just wrap up with one final kind of question. If there are, of course, any more that comes through, we'll try to address them. But also conscious, of course, of everybody's time this Wednesday evening. So I think the final thing that I'd like to perhaps really end off on, and also maybe get Kai's thoughts with, is this film was in a way like something that, you know, we had been talking about for quite a few months. And I know you've mentioned a few times the experimental nature of it kind of allowed you to access or move into spaces that maybe you might not have, you know, been as you might not have moved into if not for this particular opportunity. And I was wondering if you could also expand a little bit on like I guess also what you felt the possibilities here afforded you. There's a lot that I think that this film kind of, it feels like it points out a lot of new directions that you might be interested in taking forward. So I wonder whether you would also like to share a bit on like, not just in terms of like what you thought in terms of experimenting with the format, and then also what perhaps you might be excited to dive deeper into in the context of like developing this or working on other kind of like plot lines that came out as a result of playing around with these ideas.
I mean, as much as I talked quite a bit about, taking all this risky or like unexpected um, um, methods like in the work, it's also within my comfort zone because I've always wanted to work with people. And when I say work with people, meaning I want to go out to the community and um, interact with them. And because I feel like, if you notice, a lot of the footages that I got, right, is quite voyeuristic, like I am taking them when they are, it's without their knowledge, it's always from their back. When sometimes I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this for this project, but I was very scared. I wanted to go down and interact with the community that's playing cricket every weekend. And I think some of you definitely know about this. Like my fascination with like the people who play cricket like in public spaces. I wanted to do this for the longest time, but I never could gather the courage. I don't know, like maybe right also in thinking about working with people, I should also work with a team. I'm so like I cringe when I hear myself like on the film, like oh my voice, I cringe when I see my hands doing like all the dance moves and everything. Maybe yeah, I think that is the it's not a very far-fetched plan, but my plan is very simple. I want to work with more people. I want to work with a team. I want to work with writers. I don't want to be the writer, the sound recorder, the actor. I think that's what I have in my mind already. Um, but also moving into like the work, right? Like the medium. I think it's going back to the objects now. A lot of times um, you see objects, you see um, installation, and now you see all these moving images, right? Um, I did this quite a bit recently in the show Hai Jamil, Silent Hands, where I kind of like accumulate all these sculptures, objects, a moving image together. I think I want to like replicate that format for a bit and eventually bring in like live performances. I think like in yeah, like I think that is like the plan. But also like now as I'm speaking with you, I'm also like laughing to myself like Kai, please, like if you want to bring in live in performances, that means you need to bring in real people, and to bring in real people I have to interact. So I think maybe it's about that. Maybe it's about lesser shooting, more interacting. Yeah, maybe that's
Yeah,
what
that sounds
want to
like
do.
a
Not I should do. I want to do.
yeah, it sounds like a natural kind of next step, to be honest, and it's quite exciting what some of these ambitions are for yourself. We have two final questions. I think one of them you might have touched on in various ways in like some of your previous responses. So the question reads, how do you decide to join a piece of video with another? Is there some basis like adhering to a theme?
I really want to give like a smart answer. But the truth is, a lot of times it's really just putting them together and see, and then if it doesn't work, change the pairing, you know. But also not just putting them side by side, but also think about all these elements, right? Like image or footages, you put them side by side, you know. Think also in between, because sometimes I also put in like a footage layer over it that spans across two different footage at the back. You understand where like what I'm saying, right? And then also think about the sound, and how does the sound also offset that particular footage. But also subtitles. I feel like people don't realize like how subtitles is also such. I mean, there's so much to explore. Subtitles are not direct translations. You can never get the perfect subtitles, because translation is again so fluid. Who are you speaking to? Who is your audience? Think about that. Like, I think subtitles, subtitle alone is enough to really play. It's not so much about the footages. I will be frank with you. Like, there were also so many footages that were. It's almost like acting, right? I feel like the actors doesn't have to act so much sometimes. Sometimes the actors just have to be, right? They just have to be there and not overact. Let the sound do the job. Let the extras, let the lighting do the job. So not all footages have to be so catchy. Not all the footages have to be like the reflection of the water sparkly. Not all footages have to be like that. Some footages could just be the grass and nothing. Some footages could just be, I think that's how I mean, it's funny because now, I mean, I use the analogy of like actors, right? Because I don't work with actors, so the footages, the subtitles, they become like stand-in for actors, And this is also something that I work, a kind of like reasoning that I stand by all the time when I teach assemblage to my students. Sometimes when you go out to gather objects to make an assemblage, you look for all the flashy things. Most of the times, the flashy things do nothing. Most of the times, it's all the really mediocre, very plain, very sad-looking objects. They are the ones that actually have a lot of weight. The shiny thing could just be one sparkle at the end, But the whole basis of the assemblage or the work is really about combining all this very seemingly. Because when it's too loud, I think then you don't have to pair it with anything, But again, here I'm thinking very much about painting, about drawing, like all these formal ways of thinking, color, balance. It's funny because now I'm also trying to resist that, but I'm also using that. So
Yeah, it's also maybe, it's always going to be something that you're going to be negotiating. So it's probably something that we'll see in future projects or future works by yourself. And the final question that we have today is it's really about that. What are some of the future things that you're working on, and what can we look forward to seeing you get up to?
There are a few things. If people have not noticed, I think I have kind of like one thing I decided that I wanted to maybe pace myself at a more reasonable pace. There are a few projects coming out soon. It's funny because I cannot say it yet because it's not officially, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but there are a few quite exciting projects. Yeah.
So secretive.
Is that saying anything? No, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess it's more of like watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space, or come, let's hang out. Let's like, yeah. I want to see people making art. I'm not really like, I don't know if I want to like make it, like I don't know if I'm in the headspace now to make any show. Maybe develop and make, but I don't know. Yeah. It's funny. I don't know. Oh my God, I feel so bad. Like I'm ending with this because this is the most like, what is he saying? Yeah.
No, but I think it's exciting in a way too. It's okay to not have like an immediate like list of things, and that's also quite an exciting space to be in. In many ways, it encapsulates the spirit of the film that we just watched, and also that in-betweenness that is quite central to quite a few of the things that we've been talking about, quite a few of the topics. And maybe on that note, like, thank you so much for your time. It seems like we're at time actually. So I'd really like to thank you again, Khai, for spending time with us, sharing your practice to us. And to all the viewers who are here, a big thank you to all of you too. Do look out for more online programs from SAM. And if you're in Singapore, of course, please come and check out our new space at Tanjong Pagar District Park. To end, we do have a short film that Kai made in 2021 titled Shapeshifters. And whilst preparing for this program, he rewatched Shapeshifters again and felt like it could also be read as a trailer of sorts for Terang Benderang. So to conclude, we'll be looking backwards and allowing Shapeshifters to close off this evening's program. So thank you all once again and good night.
Ini bukan cerita hantu. Ini cerita orang macam kita. Yang lagi menyerlah, jadi lagi senang untuk orang perhatikan. Orang macam kita kena pandai sesuaikan diri. Kadang-kadang kita ungu, kadang-kadang hijau. Kita orang dengan burung merpati pun tak banyak beza. Orang tu selalu kata, tempat yang gelap dan sunyi tu bahaya. Padahal tempat yang terang tu kadang-kadang lagi seram. Habis, tempat yang silau, yang sesak, bising, memekak. Tempat yang gelap tu konon ada hantu, ada jin, ada setan. Hantu dengan jin pun tak ada kacau aku pun. Diorang okey je. Korang kan, betul-betul memang tak boleh tengok aku senang sikit. Kau pernah masuk rumah dari tingkap? Atau masuk rumah dari pintu belakang? Jangan sampai orang nampak. Jangan sampai orang dengar. Sampai mati pun tak game. Keselamatan diri tu selalu kena fikir dulu. Kena ada strategi. Jaga-jaga. Sekarang ni pun jangan-jangan ada orang tengah perhatikan. Ini bukan cerita hantu. Ini cerita kita.